Getting into Harvard is hard enough as it is. Less than 5% of students who apply make the grade. But if you're an Asian American, apparently it's even harder. The Ivy League school has been taken to court by this man, Edward Blum. He alleges the college pushes down the personal ratings of Asian Americans. Harvard denies discriminating against any race group. In fact, they say it can only help a candidate. Blum is a well-known guy for his multiple legal challenges against affirmative action, and his critics doubt his intentions. They think he doesn't care about Asians, and he's just using them to further his own agenda. So, what's this really about? Well, joining me now is Janelle Wong. She's a professor of American Studies at the University of Maryland. And in Washington, D.C., we have Mike Gonzalez. He's a senior fellow at the Heritage Foundation. Thanks, both of you, for joining us. Janelle, let me start with you. Are Asian Americans discriminated against by Harvard?
There's no evidence that Asian Americans are discriminated against at Harvard. In fact, Asian American admissions at Harvard have steadily increased. And we actually see that affirmative action helps Asian Americans. I think it's really a racial stereotype to assume that Asian Americans are somehow actually more qualified than other groups to get into Harvard. They're doing very well. About 20% of Harvard's incoming class is Asian American, and Asian Americans make up about 6% of the US population.
Some people, Mike Gonzalez, who are protesting against Edward Blum, feel that his issue is a sort of Trojan horse. He's using Asian Americans as a prop because what he really wants to talk about is re-entrenching the majority's control of access to these positions. He doesn't want affirmative action for minorities. He's using Asians as a bit of a prop. Would you see any justification to that? Yeah.
Let me briefly take away this Trojan horse of Edward Blum. This is not about Edward Blum. It is very telling and noteworthy that Asian Americans who still face discrimination are able to get do very well when it comes to academic criteria such as high GPA, SAT scores. I like to really push back against almost everything Professor Wong just said. This is not ethnic stereotyping. We have very good data that shows that the GPA is higher, the SAT scores are higher. Unfortunately, the data that we have is Asian Americans. Asian Americans is not very good data because it comprises many different groups with very different cultural indicators. But if you look at the hours they spend doing homework per week, much higher. And of course, they are discriminated against. Even though the evidence of that is just very long and very extensive. They are discriminated against in admissions, not just at elite schools, but at other schools. They have to score much higher in their SATs and have much higher GPAs to have the same chance of getting into an elite school as other people from other backgrounds. And they have to, it's sad, they have to hide the fact that they're Asian backgrounds. We're talking about Americans, by the way. We're talking about Americans, whether they're born here or naturalized. Americans in 2018 should be treated as Americans. Plain and simple.
So you want a completely level playing field because you believe that we're at a point where society is, I guess, equal enough, Mike, for us to not have any quotas whatsoever. Is that what you want?
We cannot use race. We cannot use race as a criteria to grant a benefit or a penalty to somebody. That is not what we should be doing in the second decade of the 21st century.
Okay, interesting. So Janelle, let me get you to respond to this, but in your response, I want you to fold in your response to a little observation I have. While I was living in the United States, I came across something really interesting about white South Africans who are now American citizens, so they'd left South Africa. Their parents grew up under the old system in South Africa, arguably sort of reaped the benefits of the old apartheid system, moved to the United States at some point in the 80s or 90s or whatever, and they were ticking these boxes of being African American, and they were kind of gaming the system and getting benefits by being African American because they could show that they came from Africa and they were also American. So doesn't that give you an indication that when you start playing this game of quotas, you get a lot of people who can actually game the system? Janelle?
Packed into both of your remarks are quite a few, I think, very, very common misconceptions and misunderstandings about how admissions works. I see the headline here says racial quotas. Racial quotas have been ruled unconstitutional since 1978. You will not find a college campus that uses racial quotas. That would be litigated immediately. That is not what this case is about. It's not accusing Harvard of quotas because Harvard doesn't use quotas. So I want to get that on the table right away, that racial quotas have been illegal, unconstitutional,
But
and civil
let's
rights
change the word to
organizations
algorithm. Let's say it's a kind of algorithm in the admissions process where race is taken into account.
Yeah, there's also bonus points and extra kind of automatic admissions based on race that's also illegal. So what is holistic admissions? Holistic admissions includes using race as one factor among many, many, many other factors. And I will push back at Mike's comments too, that affirmative action actually helps, does not hurt Asian Americans. It creates a better learning environment. It helps Asian Americans who are underrepresented in the admissions process. And so I think that there's something a little bit more nefarious at work here. And the position that Mike is supporting is really supporting the end of the consideration of race more generally in the US. And that's fine to take that position, but let's be real about what this case is about.
Okay, so Mike, we're hearing from Janelle that the context within which you're arguing is wrong. You think everything's fine and everybody has an equal opportunity. She's saying no. Go ahead, Mike.
I guess I'm being accused of nefarious ends. Look, we're just succumbing now to an argument about semantics. And I guess, according to Professor Wong, we don't need to have a trial in Boston anymore because she assures us that Harvard is not using quotas. Of course, that is what's at stake here. If what you seek is group proportionalism in a classroom, you must use quotas. Harvard, the argument is using the same quota system that it used in the 1920s when in a very ugly way, it kept out Jewish Americans from admissions. The argument here is that plan is very similar to this plan, and it is keeping Asians out, you know, the same way. If you seek out to have diversity and you want to have something that mirrors the base population, the group proportion of the base population, you must use quotas, which is why they're in such a bind. They're in such, and by the way, this idea that everybody will benefit from a better learning environment, in other words, that a diverse student body has educational benefits, if you peel it down, what this says is it's a really anti-rational notion that there is such a thing as racial knowledge, as group facts. No, if I am admitted into Columbia, I am not there to be an ambassador for whatever group the census and the bureaucracy in Washington says I'm in. I am not there to share my lived experience with anybody else. I'm there for the purposes of education and truth discovery. It really doesn't matter where my great-great-grandparents were born, what the pigmentation of my skin is. I am not there to share my lived experience or my group knowledge with anyone else, and that is you know, that Grutter decision notion that we can do such a thing is what leads us to where we are. Of course, the argument is that quotas are being used, and of course, it is unconstitutional.
Janelle Wong.
Yeah, so I want to just emphasize that the Heritage Foundation and Ed Blum do not speak for me. I am Asian American. And I believe that affirmative action is a very important part of really underscoring equality in the United States. So I'm not sure what the investment is that Heritage Foundation or that Ed Blum has in the Asian American population, but I will just emphasize that Asian Americans, I'm a survey researcher, Asian Americans are much more likely to support than to oppose affirmative action and race-conscious admissions. And so really this group of plaintiffs who's suing Harvard is not speaking for the Asian American community. We see a lot of support in the Asian American community, and Mike isn't speaking for the Asian American community, and nor is Ed Blum.
Mike Gonzalez.
So what you know that when you start engaging into character assassination and you start claiming so there's some kind of conspiracy and you cannot argue the facts, you've run out of arguments. And that is what we're seeing here. You know, I am not speaking for anybody else. I'm speaking on behalf of principles. I'm speaking on behalf of principles. Hang on, ma'am, professor, I didn't interrupt you. I'm speaking on behalf of principles, the principles that we're all created equal, the natural right principle that we're all born free and equal, a condition we share with the rest of humanity. These are principles that I actually stand on, that I proudly proclaim. These are the principles. I don't care what the case is. I'm going to defend those principles, and that is what is at stake here. Are we all created equal or not?
Mike, let me ask you. I mean, I don't want to presuppose where you come from, right? But like, whether you like it or not, if people consider you as a sort of Latino American expert, would that annoy you?
I am an American. It doesn't matter what my background is. It shouldn't matter. Of course, it matters in some ways. You know, I may have an affinity for a certain kind of cuisine. I may speak a language around the kitchen table. None of that matters. I am an American. I studied issues. I research issues. And no, I don't like it when I'm pigeonholed. Nobody should like it when they're pigeonholed. What we need to do in society is remove significance and expectations from identity groups. That is what Professor Wong and the other proponents of this system do not get. We need to remove expectations and significance from ethnic identities.
Okay, and so Janelle, very finally, do you respect Mike's opinion? I mean, do you expect that he has a different point of looking at this, where he wants all the sort of multiple identities to collapse into one as an American, because he believes the time is now for that. Do you respect that?
Of course, I respect that people can hold different views. And I also speak as an American that cares about racial equality and racial justice. We have different ideas about how to accomplish that. I do not believe that not considering race makes any sense in America, where race makes such a difference in people's lives. That's a fundamental difference that Mike and I have. And I think a lot of Asian Americans agree with my perspective.
Okay, what Blum has done has really opened up something really interesting. And from the outside looking at it, it's been fascinating to observe. I really appreciated you both coming onto the Newsmakers, Janelle Wong and Mike Gonzalez. I hope you'll come back to discuss this and other things with us. But for now, I have to move on. Thanks again.